gas station, residence, warehouse, farmhouse, hen house, outhouse, or doghouse in that area.
I will never give up the search for Jean Valjean. If it takes me the rest of my life, I will find him.
We'll get him. This time we've got something he wants.
Hey, welcome back. This is Cinema Rolls, your go-to channel for movie comparisons, and I'm your host, Basha. In this video, we're continuing our comparison of two famous manhunters, Inspector Javert from the 1978 version of Victor Hugo's classic tale, Les Miserables, and Lieutenant Gerard from The Fugitive, both the movie and the TV versions. In part one, we got to know these characters and explored what fueled their obsession. If you haven't seen that yet, you can find a link below. Yeah, right there. Now click on more. That's it. Okay. Now, let's get started. Both of these stories involve a manhunt for an escaped convict. And the hunt gets personal for our manhunters at some point in both stories because the convict escapes on their watch. We saw the details of that in part one. The relationship between Lieutenant Gerard from The Fugitive, played by Tommy Lee Jones, and his quarry, Dr. Richard Kimble, doesn't begin until after Kimble's initial escape. But the same relationship in the Fugitive TV series, where Lieutenant Gerard is played by Barry Morse, begins a little earlier. Kimble is in Gerard's custody on a train taking him to death row and escapes when the train crashes. But, unlike Lieutenant Gerard, Inspector Javert from Les Mis has a history with his quarry, Jean Valjean. Valjean had attempted 3 escapes from prison where Javert was chief of the guards, and the 3rd time he succeeded. Javert doesn't run into Jean Valjean until many years after he's escaped and invented a completely new identity for himself. An identity so different that he's virtually unrecognizable. He isn't actively pursuing Valjean when he happens to come across him, so it takes him some time to connect the dots and realize that the mayor of the village he's been assigned to, Monsieur Madeleine, is none other than Jean Valjean himself. The recognition dawns on him slowly.
Is it possible, monsieur? Have we met before?
No.
No. You have never been in Toulon?
Never.
But Javert is not one to let go of a hunch like that. He's sure he's seen the mayor before, but he can't place him. So he starts asking around.
Where did he come from?
I don't know, but we're all grateful that he arrived. The town was quite poor, you see, but he brought with him this idea of using gumlac instead of rosin to make the black beads.
The use of gum black for making black beads rings a bell for Javert. Although in the book, I think they call the material jet.
Gum-lac.
Yes.
It is quite plentiful in Toulon. In fact, they have used it there, I believe, in making black beads.
So now he's pretty sure that he at least knows the mayor has been to Toulon. And more importantly, he knows that the mayor has a reason for hiding that fact. And in this next scene, the light bulb finally goes on.
What is your name?
We can almost see his mind flashing on that scene from so many years ago, an act of kindness and courage that must have been rare enough in Javert's experience to have stayed in his mind all this time. Likewise, in the Fugitive movie, Kimble's frequent acts of kindness are often what brings his movements to Gerard's attention. In this early scene, he actually attends to one of the prison guards who had been on the bus that crashed on his way to death row and led to his escape.
Tell the attending he's got a puncture in the epigastric area.
How the hell could he tell that by looking at his face? Got a call from Harris Community Hospital. The wounded guard swears he saw Kimble right outside the emergency room.
And he keeps returning to the hospital where he used to work for various reasons and continuing to attend to patients while he's there posing as a janitor.
I want to know how that boy ended up in surgery. Who changed those orders?
I don't know what you mean.
You stand right there. Marie! Call security!
In the Fugitive TV series, on the other hand, Gerard usually picks up Kimble's trail because someone has recognized him from his picture on a wanted poster or because he's been inadvertently photographed as part of a crowd and the photo finds its way into the newspaper.
That's him, all right.
Yeah, I checked with that photographer over at the newspaper. He said most of those workers hired out at the Crawford farm.
I mean, seriously. He's hanging out with a bunch of migrant farm workers and Gerard recognizes him from a picture in the newspaper? He must have had a full-time team of people scouring every paper in the country. How is that even possible before facial recognition software? Now, let's get back to Javert for a moment. Once he's positively ID'd Jean Valjean, tracking him down and returning him to the penal system becomes his overriding goal in life.
I will never give up the search for Jean Valjean. If it takes me the rest of my life, I will find him. And that is a sacred promise.
And he will go to almost any length to find him.
He followed them to the road out of town, a road that could lead them here to Paris. And I request a transfer here at once. If he is here, I will find him.
After he's been to Paris for a while, his supervisor sees fit to transfer him to another region.
Monsieur, I beg to remind you, we have not as yet apprehended the fugitive Jean Valjean. He is still at large.
And when his supervisor reminds him that there are other considerations besides capturing Jean Valjean, he can't really seem to comprehend how anything could be more important. I think this is because his whole identity has become wrapped up in his pursuit of Valjean. He and his quest are one. As I mentioned in part 1, this is because of his humiliation at having been bested by someone he considers to be his inferior. And if he's going to maintain his image of himself as superior to Valjean, then he has to capture him. TV Gerard's determination, while still very single-minded, seems to pale by comparison.
He is smart, but not that smart. He'll make a mistake. When he does, I'll bring him in.
Gerard, when are you due for a vacation?
I'm not taking my vacation, Captain.
We see this theme played out more than once during his 4 years of searching, where his personal life takes a back seat to his search for Richard Kimble. As he explains to his son,
Dad, you think you'll get some time off this summer?
Yeah, maybe. It's hard for me to get away, Phil.
You find that killer, that Kimble guy.
Some men drive taxis, and some men sell clothes. I'm a detective.
So, like Javert, his job is his identity. He's traveling with his son to visit his sick mother, but when he hears that somebody spotted Kimble, all those plans go out the window.
Well, it's early. Tell him I'm coming up. Tell him I'll be there in 3-4 hours.
And then there's the time that a group of migrant farm workers who had grown fond of Kimble prevent Gerard from bringing him in.
Kimble, call these people off. Kimble! Kimble!
He's clearly frustrated at having his efforts thwarted when he was so close.
Seemed to have been quite a few of them.
Yeah, if there'd been fewer, I might have gotten him.
This is a clear case of obstruction of justice, but he's got bigger fish to fry.
You want to prefer charges?
I'd have to stay here for the trials.
Afraid so, sir.
Forget it. Kimble's got enough of a head start already.
And he's even willing to risk his own life to get at Kimble. Not just because he's an escaped convict, but because he's the convict who escaped from his custody.
Trying to escape in that country is the same thing as committing suicide. Now, I wouldn't be going in there after nobody.
Now, while Inspector Javert had the foresight to transfer to Paris based on a witness's testimony that he'd seen Valjean on a road leading in that direction, most of his encounters with Valjean come about purely by coincidence. In this sense, as I mentioned earlier, TV Gerard's approach is similar. He relies on chance spottings by police officers and random members of the public who have recognized Kimble from a wanted poster. But at one point, he tries to enlist the aid of a computer scientist to predict Kimble's next move. And it does a pretty good job, but the computer doesn't do much better than he does.
Now the computer knows as much about Kimble as you do.
You and I on the 2130 are all blameless, Doctor. Kimble is simply not a predictable man.
After 4 years of searching, Gerard gets a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. He's captured Janssen, the one-armed man who Kimble has been chasing across the country because he claims that Janssen is the one who really killed his wife. So, Gerard is planning to use Janssen as bait to lead Kimble into a trap, and he's pretty confident it's going to work.
We'll get him. This time, we've got something he wants.
In contrast to the other two manhunters, Tommy Lee Gerard's hunt is less personal and more methodical, and he almost always seems to be one step ahead of Kimble.
I want phone taps. We're going to start with his lawyer first. Our fugitive has been on the run for 90 minutes. Average foot speed over uneven ground, barring injuries, 4 miles an hour. That gives us a radius of 6 miles. Upstream and down. Next thing I want to see a helicopter come over here, 100 feet off of this river. What I want out of each and every one of you is a hard target search of every gas station, residence, warehouse, farmhouse, hen house, outhouse, or doghouse in that area.
Even if he usually gets there too late.
Oh, look at this. We're eating oranges and we're making IDs.
CCH, what the hell is that?
Cook County Hospital.
When he follows that lead, he finds that Kimble has been there helping direct patient traffic while impersonating a janitor.
So a guy disguised as a janitor orders an emergency medical procedure, and the only thing you do to him is take away his ID card. How's the boy doing?
You saved his life.
And when he spots a one-armed man at the hospital, he follows up with the hospital's prosthetics unit. Because even though he doesn't care whether Kimble is guilty or innocent, he knows Kimble believes that he can prove his innocence if he tracks down the one-armed man. So Gerard knows that if he can find the one-armed man, he can find Kimble.
Point of attachments.
Mid-humorous. That gives us 47 possibles.
47?
Robert, cross-check these people for criminal records.
And his hunch pays off.
One-armed man, armed robbery. That's funny.
He guesses that Kimble is going to visit that one-armed man in prison, so he heads over there to apprehend him. But although he does spot Kimble there, Kimble eludes capture once again. And it turns out to be the wrong one-armed man anyway. But Gerard doesn't drop this thread, and it pays off in the end because he does end up finding the one-armed man that Kimble is looking for, with Kimble's help. Now, in all these versions, there comes a time when the tables are turned. In the Fugitive movie, it comes early on in the story and gives Gerard his first glimpse at who Richard Kimble really is as a person. When Gerard drops his gun in the sewer, Kimble picks it up and points it at Gerard long enough to proclaim his innocence.
I didn't kill my wife! I don't care!
But he doesn't shoot and turns around and flees. That sewer scene, by the way, was an homage to the famous sewer scene in Les Mis where Javert follows Jean Valjean chest deep in sewage. And I think the differences in the filthiness of the sewage itself, as well as its depth, are symbolic of the relative levels of obsession of these two men. If you ever get a chance to read Les Miserables, by the way, there's an entire chapter on the history of the Paris sewer system, and it is fascinating. Seriously, I highly recommend it. For Javert, the tables are turned when he's caught infiltrating a group of revolutionaries that Valjean has unintentionally become involved with. The rebels tie Javert up while he awaits execution as a spy, but when Valjean sees what has happened, he does something remarkable.
Let me be the one to kill the spy.
Well, go on. Take your revenge. I am waiting.
Turn around. You're free.
You madden me. I would sooner be killed.
In a way, this is yet another humiliation for Javert, and he really does mean that he would sooner be killed, because his opinion of Jean Valjean is so low that to be set free at the mercy of Valjean is for him a fate worse than death. But he does take his leave, and as soon as he can get back up, he immediately resumes his manhunt for Valjean. You'd think if someone had just saved your life, you'd be able to let bygones be bygones. Because after all, Valjean's only crime was literally stealing a loaf of bread. Unless, of course, you count the crime of humiliating Javert with his multiple escapes. Because that's what this is really all about, isn't it? In the Fugitive TV series, the tables are turned on multiple occasions over the course of 4 years. But as early as season 2, when Gerard's young son inadvertently stows away in Kimble's escape vehicle, we can see that Gerard already has a measure of Kimble as a man, because he's not overly concerned about his son's safety.
Oh, I know Kimble. I know everything about him. What kind of food he likes, what kind of books he reads, what kind of toothpaste he uses. I know him. I know what he'll do. He'll stop and feed the boy.
His attitude is somewhat of a contrast from Javert's because although Javert is also starting to get a measure of Jean Valjean as a man based on his good deeds, he's confused and unsettled by it. He can't seem to reconcile those acts with the criminal that he believes Valjean to be. His internalized dichotomy just cannot allow for any shades of gray. But the idea of a basically decent human being committing a crime, even murder, doesn't set Gerard up for an existential conflict like it does for Javert. So when the others express concern about the safety of Gerard's son...
You said he was a killer.
The jury said that.
We can tell that he already has doubts about Kimble's guilt, but that doesn't stop him from doing his job. And right or wrong, his job is to go by what the jury said. There are several occasions where Kimble actually saves Gerard's life in spite of the fact that if Gerard succeeds in apprehending Kimble, he'll be executed as a murderer. Perhaps the most poignant example is in the episode called Corner of Hell, where a group of backwoods bootleggers accuse Gerard of knocking a girl unconscious.
I never touched the girl. I found her like this. There was a man here. I saw him running away.
His defense echoes Kimble's defense almost word for word, and the bootleggers don't believe him any more than the jury believed Kimble. And it seems very important to Gerard that Kimble believe in his innocence.
Kimble. I didn't do it.
Certainly part of the reason he wants Kimble to believe him is that he's hoping Kimble can convince the bootleggers to let him go. But it seems that he's also come to have a certain amount of respect for Kimble during the time that he's been chasing him, and he believes in Kimble's humanity, believes that he would want to spare him from a miscarriage of justice. So it's all the more ironic when Gerard later tries to convince the bootleggers to release him so he can arrest Kimble and bring him to justice.
That man was convicted in a court of law.
But old Tully, the head bootlegger, doesn't have much respect for the court of law.
I've been locked up to court once or twice myself. I know how that is.
And Gerard, faced with the very real possibility of losing his life at the hands of these men, without any chance to defend himself, defends the justice system.
Our system of justice may not be perfect, but it does give every man a fair chance to defend himself.
How about that, Doc? You get a fair chance in court?
Notice the look that passes between Kimble and Gerard when he answers.
Yes.
And even Tully seems to have more faith in the court's decision when it comes to someone other than himself.
You mean he's speaking true? You were a killer?
No, I couldn't prove my innocence. But they let me try.
I find this very interesting, that he was convicted because he couldn't prove his innocence. Wasn't it up to the prosecutor to prove his guilt rather than the other way around? Innocent until proven guilty? Meanwhile, Gerard has invested a lot of time and energy into hunting down a man who couldn't prove his innocence, and now he finds himself in precisely the same predicament. And the stakes keep mounting when Tully sets up a kangaroo court and the first witness states that he saw Gerard stooping over the unconscious girl.
That is circumstantial evidence. It proves nothing. Didn't you people ever hear of reasonable doubt? I told you that I found her unconscious, and I saw a man running away.
And when it's clear that the bootleggers plan to string him up, Gerard turns to Kimble to intervene on his behalf.
They're going to lynch me. That's murder.
What happened, Gerard?
I found the girl. I saw a man.
But you can't prove it. And the girl says you're to blame. Pretty convincing.
Oh, the irony. And it's not lost on Kimble either, but he still does what he can to help Gerard.
Now, if he takes me away, they'll put me to death. Elfie, I know he's not the kind of man that beats up on girls.
The bootleggers still aren't convinced, so he goes to talk to Elvie, the girl who's been accusing Gerard, and does a little detective work of his own.
You know, Gerard will give you this $300 if you go out there and tell the truth.
$340.
No, it's $300, Elvie. Don't tell me that one of your own folks would cheat you after you lied for them.
The truth eventually does come out, thanks in part to Kimble's intervention.
If Elvie stole the wallet and he knocked her out, why didn't he take it back?
And Gerard is released. So you'd think that that, combined with what he's now come to know of Kimble as a human being after all these years, might make him think twice about Kimble's innocence, wouldn't you?
Kimble, you're gonna go on running. There's a man I have to find. Still the same fairy tale.
Even though he's walked 1.5 miles in Kimble's shoes, he still thinks that Kimble's story about the one-armed man is pure fabrication. Why?
So nothing changes. And nothing changes the truth. The truth is still that you're guilty before the law.
Because just like Inspector Javert, the law is the only truth for Gerard, the letter of the law. It overrides even what he knows in his heart to be true. We see this illustrated very clearly in a conversation with his son who's attempted to help Kimble escape.
He's wanted for murder.
He says he didn't do it.
Of course he says that.
And if he's right?
Well, that means that I'm wrong. Doesn't it, Phil?
And that's a big difference between Gerard and Javert. Gerard actually seems to be willing to concede that he and the law could make a mistake. How do Lieutenant Gerard and Inspector Javert cope when their version of reality is challenged? That's what we're going to be looking at in part 3 when we explore the exciting conclusion and the fallout at the end of the manhunt. And you can watch that video right now by clicking on the end card. See you there!